Right friends, welcome back to main events of 24th week, and please don't forget for 23rd week, 24th week and 25th week you will have only 3 modules every week, and from 26th week onwards the pattern got changed. You are viewing capsules from 26th week onwards. Please look into the YouTube channel to look at the changes what we have made since 26th week. And if you look at the main events for 24th week, India's first ever national civil aviation policy was unveiled, and the important aspect is regional connectivity scheme, and the airfare will be rupees 2,500 per 1 hour journey to remote areas of the country. Then India and the United States to share data on terrorists. This is very important because it is the database of terrorist organizations and terrorists across the world. And already around 30 countries gave their willingness to coordinate in this effort by United States of America, and India recently agreed to share data on terrorists. Skill development, this is target area for the government, and government under National Skill Development Mission wants to train 1.5 crore people during 2016-17. Then RAJAN going back to academia, and he is going to join Chicago University's Booth School of Business in September 2016 after completing 3-year tenure. Then cabinet approves a merger of 5 associate banks and Bharatiya Mahila Bank with the State Bank of India. Then Microsoft acquired LinkedIn, the organ of professionals across the world, for $26.2 billion. Then another scheme by the Reserve Bank of India, that is a scheme for sustainable structuring of stressed assets, or you can say S4A, basically to look at the bad debts of banking system. So let us look at one by one. India unveiled its first ever national civil aviation policy, and after independence this is for the first time that India unveiled first civil aviation policy, and it is the comprehensive policy covering 22 areas of the civil aviation, and the main theme of the policy is regional air connectivity, which aims to make flying affordable and convenient to the masses of this country. And the policy will lead to significant growth of the sector to promote tourism, employment and balanced regional growth. And at the same time, it will increase ease of doing business index through deregulation, simplified procedures and e-governance. I have taken 3 important aspects of national civil aviation policy. The first one is Regional Connectivity Scheme, or RCS. Here, airfare to remote parts of the country is about rupees 2,500 per passenger for 1 hour flight. That means if someone wants to travel 1 hour flight journey to remotest and identified parts of the hinterland, then we have to pay rupees 2,500 per passenger for 1 hour flight. And this will come into force from the second quarter of 2016-17, and here it may not be viable because the actual cost of operating air services to remotest parts of the country may be much more than that. Suppose if the cost is rupees 3,500, passenger will be charged 2,500, and the balance rupees 1,000 will be given as viability gap funding, which is known as VGF. Please don't forget, VGF or viability gap funding is the funding given by the governments when the projects are not viable. This is the term normally used in PPP projects. When the PPP projects are not viable, then governments will contribute. That is known as viability gap funding. And similarly, in the airline sector, under this regional connectivity scheme, this viability gap funding concept is introduced. Center and states will share at 80 and 20%. and for the northeastern states, center and northeastern states will share at 90 and 10%. So, this viability gap funding will be given by the governments to the airline operators operating flights to the interior parts of the country. And no airport charges here, revival of airstrips or airports as no frills airports at a cost of rupees 50 crore to rupees 100 crores. That means airports in the hinterland will be developed by spending rupees 50 crore to rupees 100 crore without luxurious additions. Please look into this slide. No frills airport is basically without luxurious additions. Customers will be offered lower prices, and states should give support and reduce value added tax on airline turbine fuel to 1% or less. That means the states also should cooperate for introduction of this regional connectivity scheme. Overall, this scheme will facilitate the connection with airlines to the hinterland of the country. Looking to the second aspect of National Civil Aviation Policy, 5/20 scheme liberalized. There was lot of criticism on 5/20 scheme. You may ask what is meant by 5/20 scheme. 5/20 scheme, which was in vogue prior to this National Civil Aviation Policy, mandates for the airlines to fly abroad. They should have minimum 5 years of experience, and at the same time they should have minimum 20 aircraft. So, 5 years of experience and 20 aircraft, this was mandatory before the introduction of National Civil Aviation Policy. But now in National Civil Aviation Policy, this scheme was liberalized with a view to ensure level playing field, and now airlines can commence international operations provided they deploy 20 aircraft or 20% of total capacity, whichever is higher for domestic operations. That means technically this 5/20 scheme became 0/20 scheme. So, 5 years experience in domestic operations was taken off. Third important aspect is the open sky policy. What is meant by open sky policy? Open sky policy is for international flight operations, removing several restrictions and you can say deregulation of restrictions. That means certain rules will be liberalized for international flight operations. So, open sky policy, government will enter into open sky air services agreement, or you can say air transport agreement on a reciprocal basis with SAARC countries and for the countries located 5,000 kilometers beyond Delhi. So, these three are important aspects of National Civil Aviation Policy 2016, which was announced in the month of June 2016. Look into the next one, India and United States to share data on terrorists, and the relation with United States is increasing day by day. And recently United States of America declared India as a major defense partner. And shortly India and USA are going to sign logistics agreement LEMO, LEMOA, Logistics Exchange Memorandum of Agreement. And now India signed an agreement to join global terror database maintained by Terrorist Screening Center of the United States of America. That means India will share data of terrorists. Previously, Research and Analysis Wing and Intelligence Bureau opposed to this proposal because it gives United States of America unhindered access to the terror suspects in India. But now India took a decision to share data with the Terrorist Screening Center of United States of America. And USA has already finalized such agreements with 30 countries, and this terrorist screening center has details of over 11,000 terror suspects on its database. So, under this agreement, both the sides will give each other access to terrorism screening information through the designated contact points, and however the exchange of information will be subjected to domestic laws and regulations. and the proposal initially made by United States of America in 2012, at the time based on the objections of RA and IB, India retracted back and now it decided to sign this agreement. With this, United States of America and India will have access to the terrorist information. Look into the next one, that is skill development. This is a target area for the government, and National Skill Development Mission. This is headed by the Prime Minister. Recently took a decision to scale up training to cover at least 1.5 crore people during 2016-17. That means the government's target is to train 15 million people during 2016-17, and overall the government's target is to give skill development to 500 million youth of this country by 2022. And how the skill development will take place during this year? There are several aspects which were discussed in the meeting headed by the Prime Minister, because he is the chairperson of National Skill Development Mission. Central Board of Skills Certification will be set up by September 2016. That means skills certification will be done by Central Board of Skills Certification, and it will work out the modalities for skill development. Then second important point is unutilized infrastructure at existing engineering colleges will be leveraged for skill training courses. Then 500 Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Kendras will be opened to provide skill training at free of cost, and profit-making public sector undertakings will be required to scale up apprenticeship by up to 10% of their total manpower during this financial year itself. In apprenticeship, we are lagging behind because apprenticeship gives an opportunity to scale up the skills of the youth, and it is now mandated to public sector undertakings to scale up their apprenticeship training to the youth of the country up to 10% of their total manpower. And at the same time, it is also decided to start 50 overseas employment skill training centers in migratory pockets. In certain parts of the country, several people migrate in search of jobs, especially in search of blue collar jobs in Gulf countries. The migration takes place from interior areas of Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, then some parts of Telangana, and especially migration to the Gulf countries takes place from Kerala. So, in these pockets, 50 overseas employment skill training centers will be established, and at the same time, in ITIs and central training institutes, 500 Rozgar Utsavs will be held. So, these are all the schemes contemplated by the central government, and finally under National Skill Development Mission, 1.5 crore people will be trained during this year. Right friends, let us move on to the next one, that is banking and economy. The most important aspect is RAGHURAM Rajan going back to academia, and he is the professor on leave at Booth School of Business in Chicago University, and we are going to analyze critically the tenure of RAGHURAM Rajan. RAGHURAM Rajan will be completing 3-year tenure by September 4, 2016, and he is the 23rd governor of Reserve Bank of India. And if you appraise critically the tenure of RAGHURAM Rajan, he is straightforward in expressing his views, which may not be palatable to many in this country. Several times he expressed doubts about the GDP growth and methodology of calculation. Second thing is strictly adhered to giving prominence to inflation, or you can say price stability, took upper hand in comparison to growth. His main focus is price stability. That means inflation should be under control, and that is not acceptable to several politicians in this country. That means the concentration of the ruling class is sometimes on growth, But Raghuram Rajan stick to his point because of the reason around 20% of the people below poverty line are still exist in this country, and at the same time predominant population in this country are middle class, and around 90% of the people are working in informal sectors where the rise in pay is not linked with inflation. That's why he gave prominence to price stability over growth. Third thing is monetary policy framework was signed between Reserve Bank of India and central government. As per the monetary policy framework, consumer price inflation is targeted to be 4% plus or minus 2% by March 2017. Then CPI inflation reduced drastically during his tenure, but there are several other reasons for it, especially the reduction in commodity prices. Then transparency in granting licenses to universal banks, payments banks and small finance banks. There is no comment on the granting of these licenses, and they were granted in most transparent way. Then stringent asset quality review to stem the rot in public sector banks. Public sector banks are into problems because of bad debts, and he started this asset quality review with iron hand that is not palatable to the banking industry as a whole. Then mobilizing FCNR deposits. You may ask, what is meant by FCNR deposits? FCNR deposits are fixed deposits varying from tenure 1 year to 5 years, and these FCNR accounts are maintained in various foreign currencies, and he mobilized FCNR deposits in 2013 so as to increase the foreign exchange reserves, and he mobilized these deposits around $34 billion of FCNR deposits in 2013 by giving a swap facility to banks. Then new initiatives like Bharat Bill Payment System. Bharat Bill Payment System is with a view to integrate retail payments across the country. Then Unified Payment Interface. Unified Payment Interface is basically to simplify payments and trade receivables exchange, that is TREDS. So these concepts are moved forward during the tenure of Raghuram Rajan. And for the first time, the central government issued 40-year tenure government securities, and this was made possible with the foresight of Raghuram Rajan. So these are all the aspects if you critically examine the tenure of Raghuram Rajan. And anyhow, he is going to join back as professor at Booth School of Business of Chicago University in September 2016. And let us hope the successor to Raghuram Rajan to continue the best practices established by Raghuram Rajan. And if you look at the next event, Cabinet approves a merger of 5 associate banks and Bharatiya Mahila Bank with the State Bank of India. And if you look at the previous mergers with the State Bank of India, State Bank of Saurashtra merged with SBI in 2008, State Bank of Indore merged with SBI in 2010, and prior to that, New Bank of India was merged with Punjab National Bank in 1993. And now Union Cabinet approved merger of 5 associate banks and Bharatiya Mahila Bank with the State Bank of India. And once this merger takes place, then SBI will become a banking behemoth with total business of around 37 lakh crores of rupees, and with every possibility for SBI in the globally top 50. At present, its rank is around 58, and there is every possibility with the merger, SBI is expected to be in the globally top 50. And this merger will take place before the conclusion of this financial year. And if you look at the snapshot on 5 associate banks, the oldest is the State Bank of Mysore, which completed 100 years in 2013 with headquarters at Bengaluru. Then State Bank of Patiala, 1917, headquarters at Patiala. Then State Bank of Hyderabad, established in 1941 with headquarters at Hyderabad. And Thiruvananthapuram based State Bank of Travancore, established in 1945. And State Bank of Bikaner and Jaipur was merged in 1963 to become State Bank of Bikaner and Jaipur, that means State Bank of Bikaner and State Bank of Jaipur merged in 1963 to become one entity, and present headquarters is Jaipur, and this is also going to be merged with State Bank of India now. And Bharatiya Mahila Bank was established in 2013, and now it is going to be merged. Out of 5 associate banks, State Bank of Hyderabad and State Bank of Patiala are 100% owned by SBI. The ownership of 100% is with SBI for 2 banks, that is State Bank of Hyderabad and State Bank of Patiala. That's why they are unlisted. And the remaining 3 banks, that is State Bank of Travancore, State Bank of Mysore and State Bank of Bikaner and Jaipur, are listed and their share prices increased substantially. And if you want to have a snapshot on total branches, total ATMs, total employees, these figures are approximate, they are not sacrosanct. Various newspapers quoted different figures, and overall the total branches for State Bank of India will become around 23 to 24,000 and total ATMs will become 52,000, but this figure is increasing day by day. And total employees for SBI and 5 associate banks put together will be around 2,77,000. Please don't take these figures as sacrosanct, and there are variations of these figures if you quote different sources. Look into the next one. Microsoft acquired LinkedIn for $26.2 billion. Microsoft, it was started in 1975 by Bill Gates and Paul Allen. It is now betting big on cloud services, and Satya Nadella is the CEO. And if you look at LinkedIn, it is the world's most valuable professional network with around 433 million professionals with 105 million active users per month. And Jeff Weiner is the CEO of LinkedIn. Look at the last one, that is a scheme for sustainable structuring of stressed assets, or otherwise S4A. And Reserve Bank devised this scheme to look at the stressed assets problem in the banking system. Stressed assets means gross non-performing assets and restructured assets. These two put together are known as stressed assets in the banking system. And for public sector banks, they are abnormally high. And Reserve Bank of India previously devised several mechanisms. One such mechanism was SDR. SDR is strategic debt restructuring. That means when the borrower is not able to pay back, then banks are allowed to take over the management of the company. The debt can be converted to equity and banks can take over the management of the company. That is a strategic debt restructuring. Then other mechanism is selling of assets to asset reconstruction companies. This is as per SARFAESI Act of 2002. These bad loans can be sold to asset reconstruction companies. Then third thing is debt recovery tribunals are already available, but they are not successful. Then 5/25 scheme. Under 5/25 scheme, banks can grant loans up to 25 years duration for infrastructure sector, and these loans can be refinanced at every 5 to 7 years. These are the mechanisms available to banks, but the Reserve Bank felt that there is a need for another mechanism to solve the problem of this bad debts. And here the outstanding debt is divided into sustainable debt and equity or quasi-equity. And to ensure transparency, an overseeing committee set up by Indian Banks Association in consultation with Reserve Bank of India will review the process. Please look into this slide. Company has taken loan and it is not able to pay back every month. Then that is known as a non-performing asset, or you can say stressed asset. Let us assume company XXX has taken loan from a bank and it is not able to service the loan as the debt is too high. And under these circumstances, as per this S4A, that is a scheme for sustainable structuring of stressed assets, the debt can be divided into sustainable debt and equity or quasi-equity. and the debt can be converted into sustainable debt and equity or quasi equity, and the sustainable debt should be at least a minimum of 50% of total debt, and this equity or quasi equity should be up to a maximum of 50% of the debt. And by dividing this debt into two portions, then banks have to think about the retrieval of this company. That means it is expected that the company will survive by bifurcation of debt into these two components, and banks will take steps for putting the company back on the track. And the mechanism so as to ensure transparency should be overseen by a overseeing committee, and this overseeing committee will be set up by Indian Banks Association in consultation with Reserve Bank of India, and we have to wait and see whether this is going to be successful or not. Right friends, with this let us conclude the 24th week lecture, and this is the third module for 24th week. And for 24th, 25th along with the 23rd, you will have only 3 modules every week, and from 26th week the pattern already changed. Please go through YouTube channel. Right friends, have a nice day. Thank you.